The aluminum ladder crashed into the concrete with a sickening crunch, its twisted metal frame reflecting the fury in Margaret Whitmore's eyes. What started as a simple pool party invitation had spiraled into a neighborhood war that would expose dark secrets, shatter lives, and prove that some people will destroy everything rather than admit they're wrong. But Margaret had no idea that the security camera hidden in the oak tree had captured every violent swing of her designer handbag, or that the quiet family sheathed the morning sun cast long shadows across Maple Grove's pristine sidewalks as David Chen adjusted the new pool ladder for the third time, making sure it was perfectly aligned with the deck's edge. His 8-year-old daughter, Emma, bounced excitedly beside him, her purple swimsuit already damp from testing the water temperature. "Is it ready, Dad? Can we have the party now?" Emma's voice carried the pure joy that only children possess when summer promises endless possibilities. David smiled, wiping sweat from his forehead. After months of saving and planning, their backyard had finally been transformed into the oasis. He'd dreamed of a place where Emma could make memories with her friends, where his wife Sarah could relax after long shifts at the hospital, where they could prove that the American dream was still alive for families willing to work for it. Almost, "Sweetheart, just need to excuse me." The voice cut through the morning air like a blade. David turned to see Margaret Whitmore marching across his lawn, her platinum hair pulled into a severe bun, her HOA president badge gleaming on her pristine blazer. Behind her trailed 2 other board members, their faces wearing matching expressions of manufactured outrage. "Mrs. Whitmore," David said carefully, stepping protectively in front of Emma, "what can I help you with?" Margaret's cold blue eyes surveyed the pool area with obvious disgust. "This structure was not approved by the Homeowners Association. You violated Section 4.2 of our architectural guidelines." David felt his jaw tighten. "I submitted the plans 8 months ago. They were approved in writing. That approval has been revoked." Margaret produced a folder thick with documents, her manicured nails clicking against the metal clasp. "The board met last night and determined that your pool installation creates an unacceptable aesthetic disruption to our community's property values. Unacceptable." Sarah's voice came from the patio door, her scrubs still on from her night shift. She looked exhausted, but her eyes blazed with protective fury. "We followed every rule, paid every fee, and waited for every permit. What exactly is unacceptable about our family enjoying our own backyard?" Margaret's smile was arctic. "The noise, for starters, children screaming at all hours, the smell of chlorine drifting into neighboring yards, the unsightly equipment cluttering. Your landscape," her gaze fixed on David with unmistakable disdain. "Some people simply don't understand how to maintain community standards." The racial undertone wasn't subtle, and David felt Emma's small hand slip into his. His daughter might be young, but she wasn't naive. She'd already learned that some adults would judge her family by the color of their skin rather than the content of their character. "We have every right to use our property as we see fit," Sarah said, stepping down from the patio. "Within the approved guidelines, which we've followed to the letter." Margaret's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Rights, in Maple Grove, we have responsibilities. Responsibilities to maintain the character and value of this neighborhood. Some residents understand this better than others." David's hands clenched into fists, but he forced his voice to remain level. "What exactly are you asking us to do? Remove it. All of it. The pool, the equipment, this garish ladder arrangement. Return your yard to its original, appropriate condition." Margaret's tone suggested she was being extremely reasonable. "We'll give you 30 days. 30 days! Sarah's voice cracked with disbelief. "Do you have any idea how much this cost? How long we saved? We can't just... That's not my problem." Margaret's mask of civility slipped, revealing the ugly truth beneath. "Perhaps you should have considered your financial limitations before attempting improvements beyond your means." The silence that followed was pregnant with tension. Emma squeezed David's hand tighter, sensing the adult emotions swirling around her like a dangerous storm. "We're not removing anything," David said quietly. "This pool was legally installed with proper permits and approved plans. If you want to change the rules, you'll need to compensate us for our investment." Margaret's face flushed crimson. "Compensate you? For ruining our neighborhood's reputation?" "I think not." She turned to her fellow board members. "Document everything. Take photographs. I want a complete record of this eyesore." As the board members began pulling out phones and cameras, David felt something shift inside him. For months, he'd endured Margaret's passive-aggressive comments at community meetings, her sudden safety inspections of his property, her complaints about his landscaping choices. He'd tolerated it all for the sake of neighborhood peace, believing that patience and respect would eventually win over even the most prejudiced hearts. But watching these people photograph his family's joy as if it were evidence of a crime, seeing Emma's excitement wither under their disapproving stares, David realized that some battles couldn't be won with kindness. "I think you should leave," he said, his voice carrying a new edge. "You've delivered your message. Now get off my property." Margaret's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. "Such hostility. Perhaps this behavior explains why you're having difficulty integrating into our community standards." Integration. Sarah stepped forward, her exhaustion replaced by blazing anger. "We've lived here for 3 years. We volunteer at the school, donate to community drives, and maintain our property better than half the board members. What exactly are we supposed to integrate into?" "Civility, for starters," Margaret snapped. "Respect for authority. Understanding that not everyone is suited for, get out." David's voice was granite now. Margaret's smile returned, but it was the predatory grin of someone who'd just been handed exactly what she wanted. "Very well, but this isn't over. I hope you've kept your receipts, because in 30 days, you're going to need them for the disposal company." As the 3 board members stalked away, David wrapped his arms around Emma, feeling her small body trembling against his chest. Sarah sank into a patio chair, her head in her hands. "What are we going to do?" she whispered. David looked at their beautiful pool, at the ladder he'd so carefully installed, at the dreams they'd built with their own hands and savings. Then he looked at his daughter's tear-filled eyes and made a decision that would change everything. "We're going to fight." But neither David nor Sarah noticed the slight movement in the oak tree at the corner of their property, where a small camera lens had recorded every word, every gesture, every moment of Margaret Whitmore's true character being revealed in the harsh light of morning. 3 days after Margaret's ultimatum, David sat in his home office staring at the laptop screen, the glow illuminating the dark circles under his eyes. Sleep had become elusive since the confrontation, replaced by endless research into HOA laws. Sarah moved quietly behind him, setting down a cup of coffee that had long since grown cold. "Find anything useful?" she asked, her voice hoarse from another grueling shift at the hospital. David rubbed his temples. "Maybe there's a clause in the original HOA charter about retroactive rule changes. They can't just revoke an approval without cause or compensation." He gestured at the stack of papers covering his desk. "But proving it means going up against their lawyer fund with whatever we can scrape together, which is practically nothing after the pool installation." Sarah sank into the chair beside him, her shoulders sagging under the weight of their situation. "David, maybe we should consider." "No." The word came out harder than he intended. "We're not backing down. Not this time." Through the window, they could see Emma in the backyard, sitting alone on the pool's edge with her feet dangling in the water. She hadn't invited any friends over since Margaret's visit, as if she understood that their family's joy had somehow become a source of shame. "She's been so quiet," Sarah whispered. "Yesterday she asked me if we were bad people for wanting a pool." David's heart clenched. "What did you tell her? That some people are afraid of others being happy?" Sarah's voice cracked. "But she's 8, David. She shouldn't have to understand that level of cruelty." A sharp knock at the front door interrupted their conversation. David and Sarah exchanged worried glances as unexpected visitors had become a source of anxiety in their home. David opened the door to find Tom Morrison, their next-door neighbor, shifting nervously on the porch. Tom was Margaret's polar opposite, a soft-spoken widower who kept to himself and tended his garden with meticulous care. "Tom, is everything okay?" The older man glanced around nervously before stepping closer. "Can I come in? There's something you need to see." Minutes later, Tom sat in their living room, his weathered hands clasped tightly around a tablet. "I didn't know if I should get involved," he began hesitantly. "Margaret's got influence in this neighborhood, and I'm not looking for trouble. What is it, Tom?" Sarah asked gently. Tom's fingers trembled as he activated the tablet screen. "I installed a security system last month after those break-ins over on Cedar Street. The camera in my backyard oak tree has a pretty wide angle, and it caught what happened Monday morning. David leaned forward as Tom turned the screen toward them. The video was crystal clear, their backyard, the confrontation with Margaret. Every word audible through the device's sensitive microphone. It was what happened after Margaret and the board members left that made David's blood run cold. On screen, Margaret could be seen returning alone 20 minutes later, approaching their property from the side yard where she wouldn't be visible from the house windows. She moved with purpose, her face twisted with rage as she surveyed the pool area. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed as they watched Margaret grab the new pool ladder, struggling with its weight before lifting it above her head and slamming it down onto the concrete decking. The aluminum crumpled with a sickening crash, its safety railings bent beyond repair. But Margaret wasn't finished. The video showed her methodically damaging the pool's filtration system, yanking at hoses and kicking the pump housing. She grabbed handfuls of decorative stones from the landscaping and hurled them into the crystal-clear water, the splashes catching the afternoon sunlight like scattered diamonds. The destruction continued for nearly 10 minutes. Margaret's face contorted with a fury that was both terrifying and revealing. This wasn't about community standards or property values. This was personal, visceral hatred given physical form. "She came back," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She actually came back and destroyed our property." Tom nodded grimly. "The timestamp shows this was about an hour before you and Emma discovered the damage. You thought it was vandalism. By kids, right?" David remembered that afternoon vividly, Emma's heartbroken sobs when they found the ladder twisted beyond recognition. The pool water clouded with debris, their dreams literally shattered across the concrete. They'd called the police, filed a report, but with no witnesses or evidence, the investigation had gone nowhere. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Sarah asked, though her tone held no accusation, only exhaustion. Tom's face flushed with shame. "Margaret's been HOA president for 12 years. She's got connections with the city council, the police chief, half the local businesses. I've seen what happens to people who cross her." He paused, meeting David's eyes. "But watching that little girl cry over what that woman did, I couldn't stay silent anymore." David felt something shift inside his chest, a tightness that had been there for months, finally beginning to loosen. "Tom, this changes everything. This is criminal destruction of property, trespassing, vandalism." "It's more than that," Sarah interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "This proves she lied to the police. She filed a report claiming she witnessed suspicious individuals in our backyard that day, suggesting we were staging the damage for insurance fraud." Tom's eyebrows shot up. "She did what?" David pulled out his phone, scrolling through saved emails. "Here, she sent this to the entire HOA mailing list 3 days ago." He read aloud, "Recent insurance claims by certain residents regarding alleged vandalism raise questions about the lengths. Some will go to avoid accountability for their poor decisions. She's been destroying our reputation while covering up her own crimes," Sarah said, anger replacing exhaustion in her voice. "She's been playing victim while she's the one committing felonies." Tom stood up, his hands shaking as he powered down the tablet. "I need to get this to the police. But David, Sarah, you need to be prepared. Margaret won't go down without a fight. She's got resources, connections, and a lot to lose." After Tom left, David and Sarah sat in their darkened living room, the weight of revelation settling around them like a heavy blanket. Outside, Emma had abandoned the pool and was now sitting in the grass, braiding dandelion stems with the focused intensity that children bring to simple tasks. "She's going to claim the video is fake," Sarah said finally, "or that Tom doctored it somehow." David nodded. "She hire the best lawyers money can buy. Try to discredit us, Tom, anyone who stands against her. So what do we do?" David looked at his daughter through the window, thinking about the fear in her eyes, the questions about whether they were bad people, the careful way she'd started, apologizing for existing in spaces where others deemed her unwelcome. "We document everything," he said. "Every interaction, every threat, every lie she's told. We build a case so solid that even her connections can't save her." He turned to Sarah, his eyes hard with determination. "And we find out who else she's done this to, because I guarantee we're not her first victims." Sarah reached for his hand. "This could get ugly, David, really ugly." "It's already ugly," he replied. "But now we have proof. Now we have hope." As if sensing their conversation, Emma looked up from her dandelion chain and waved at them through the window, her smile tentative but genuine. In that moment, David made a silent promise to his daughter. No one would ever again make her question her right to joy, to safety, to the simple pleasure of a summer afternoon by the pool. Margaret Whitmore had made a fatal error when she let her mask slip in front of Tom Morrison's camera. She'd revealed herself not as a concerned community leader, but as a criminal driven by hatred and prejudice. And now that truth was about to set the Chen family free. Detective Maria Santos studied the security footage for the third time, her weathered face reflecting years of dealing with neighborhood disputes that escalated beyond reason. Across from her desk, David and Sarah sat rigidly, while Tom Morrison fidgeted with his car keys, clearly uncomfortable in the sterile police station environment. "This is pretty damning evidence," Santos said finally, pausing the video at the moment Margaret hurled stones into the pool. "Criminal mischief, destruction of property, trespassing. The damage estimate you provided puts this in felony territory." David leaned forward. "What about the false police report she filed? The insurance fraud accusations? Those are additional charges?" "Yes." Santos made notes in her file. "But, I have to warn, you, Mrs. Whitmore, has been a pillar of this community for over a decade. Her husband sits on the City Planning Commission. This won't be a simple arrest and prosecution." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Are you saying she's above the law?" "I'm saying prepare for a fight." Santos met her gaze directly. "Rich, connected people don't go down easy. They hire expensive lawyers who specialize in discrediting evidence and witnesses." As they left the police station, David felt a familiar weight settling on his shoulders. Even with video proof, even with clear criminal behavior, the system seemed designed to protect people like Margaret while grinding down families like his. But that afternoon brought an unexpected phone call that would change everything. "Mr. Chen, this is Patricia Valdez. I got your number from Tom Morrison." The woman's voice was hesitant but determined. He said, "You might be having trouble with Margaret Whitmore." David's pulse quickened. "Yes, we are. Why?" "Because she destroyed my garden 3 years ago. Killed my roses, poisoned my vegetable patch, then convinced the HOA to fine me for failing to maintain acceptable landscaping standards." Within an hour, Patricia sat in their living room, a manila folder thick with photographs and documents spread across the coffee table. She was a small woman in her 60s, with silver hair and hands that bore the calluses of decades spent coaxing life from soil. "Margaret claimed my roses were attracting bees that posed a safety hazard to the neighborhood," Patricia explained, her voice shaking with suppressed anger. She got the board to pass an emergency ordinance banning aggressive flowering plants from front yards. Sarah stared at the photographs showing Patricia's once magnificent garden reduced to withered stalks and brown earth. "This is beautiful work. Why would anyone destroy something so lovely?" Patricia's laugh was bitter. "Because my late husband was Mexican, and Margaret never let me forget it. She'd make comments about authentic landscaping and whether I had proper documentation for my plantings." Her eyes hardened. "The day after Roberto's funeral, she left a note in my mailbox suggesting I might be more comfortable in a neighborhood that better reflected my cultural preferences." David felt sick. "Did you report this?" "To who?" Margaret was already HOA president. "The police said it was a civil matter. My neighbors, ... double quotes, Patricia shrugged helplessly. "Margaret controls the community newsletter, the social events, even which contractors get recommended for home repairs. Cross her, and suddenly your life becomes very difficult." That evening, word spread through an underground network of whispered conversations and careful phone calls. By the next morning, David's phone was ringing constantly. Mrs. Rodriguez from Elm Street, Margaret had her car towed from her own driveway, claiming it violated parking regulations that didn't exist in the HOA charter. The Johnsons from Oak Avenue, Margaret, had filed noise complaints. Every time their teenage son practiced basketball in their driveway, eventually forcing them to install expensive soundproofing, Dr. Ahmed from Pine Circle, Margaret had launched a campaign questioning his foreign medical credentials after he'd disagreed with her during a board meeting about community pool hours. By week's end, David had documented 17 separate incidents spanning 8 years of pattern of harassment, discrimination, and abuse of power that painted Margaret not as a concerned community leader, but as a neighborhood tyrant who wielded the HOA like a personal weapon. The breaking point came when Rebecca Martinez contacted them. Rebecca was barely 25, a single mother working 2 jobs to afford her small townhouse on the edge of Maple Grove. She arrived at the Chen house after her evening shift, still wearing her restaurant uniform. Her 4-year-old son, Miguel, sleeping in her arms. "She tried to take my home," Rebecca said simply, settling Miguel on the couch. "Last year, Margaret decided my daycare business was a commercial enterprise that violated residential zoning. She got the city to launch an investigation, filed complaints with the state licensing board, even called Child Protective Services, claiming I was endangering children in an unregulated environment." Sarah's hands clenched into fists. A licensed daycare is endangering children. That's what I kept saying. But suddenly, I was drowning in legal fees, inspection costs, documentation requirements. I had to close the daycare, which meant losing half my income. Rebecca's voice cracked. I almost lost the house. Had to move in with my mother for 6 months until I could get back on my feet. David studied the young woman's exhausted face, thinking about Emma, about all the children who'd been affected by Margaret's crusade. "Rebecca, would you be willing to testify? To go on record about what she did?" Rebecca looked down at her sleeping son, her jaw setting with determination. "If it means stopping her from hurting other families, yes, I'll testify." That night, David sat in his office organizing the mountain of evidence they'd accumulated. Photographs, emails, police reports, witness statements, a comprehensive portrait of systematic abuse spanning nearly a decade. But, as he worked, a nagging worry gnawed at him. His phone rang at nearly midnight. The caller ID showed Detective Santos. "Mr. Chen, I need to warn you about something." Her voice was tense. "Mrs. Whitmore came in this afternoon with her attorney. They're claiming you've been harassing her, organizing some kind of neighborhood conspiracy to damage her reputation." David's blood chilled. "That's ridiculous. We're documenting crimes she committed." "I know that, and you know that, but she's filed a restraining order request, claiming you've been conducting surveillance on her property, encouraging others to make false accusations, and creating a hostile environment that's affecting her health and safety. She's the one who committed felonies. We have video proof, which her lawyer is claiming was doctored. They've hired a digital forensics expert who says the timestamp and audio don't match, that the footage has been manipulated to frame an innocent woman." David sank into his chair, the weight of Margaret's counterattack hitting him like a physical blow. "So, what happens now?" "Now it gets complicated. Her lawyer is good. He's already filed motions to suppress the video evidence, claiming it was obtained illegally without proper consent for surveillance across property lines." Santos paused. "David, this woman is playing hardball. She's not just defending herself, she's going on the offensive." Before Margaret's strategy was becoming clear, she would use her resources and connections to turn the legal system against them, portraying herself as the victim of a coordinated attack by disgruntled neighbors. But as dawn broke over Maple Grove, David realized something that filled him with cold determination. Margaret had made one crucial mistake in her counterattack sheet. Assumed that the families she'd terrorized would scatter when faced with legal pressure, that they'd retreat into silence rather than risk further retaliation. She'd underestimated the power of people who had nothing left to lose. By morning, David's phone was ringing again. But this time, it wasn't more victims calling for help. It was reporters, civil rights attorneys, and community activists who'd gotten wind of Margaret's systematic campaign of harassment. The story was about to explode beyond the confines of Maple Grove, and Margaret Whitmore was about to discover that some fights can't be won with money and connections alone.